We are live.
Okay, hello and welcome everybody to this latest edition of Sales Chat. We're very delighted today to welcome Robert Terson, who is the author of Selling Fearlessly and just has a long, rich history of helping salespeople sell better. So welcome, Robert, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Do you want to just start off? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and and your extremely impressive career, and then we'll get straight into the questions.
Well, I'm 71. I retired 5 years ago. I sold advertising to small business people for 40 years. Pardon me. I had my own company for 38 of those years. And I had a fine time. Some site just named me one of the top 50 salespeople, and they put me alongside people like Jeff Bezos. And I told them I didn't think I necessarily deserved that, but thank you kindly.
Oh, well, there you go. Excellent. Okay, well, let's get right into the first question. I want to ask you about this concept of the equality mindset. I mean, what is that? What's that all about?
Well, most salespeople approach a prospect from a point of deference,
right?
Subservience, even. They're here and the prospect's up here, and the attitude is, thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time, and please listen to me, and I hope you're going to buy this. All the great salespeople do not do that. They're polite, they're respectful, but they're not deferential. And they're certainly not subservient. They meet these people eyeball to eyeball from a point of equality. And why not? They know their business. They're providing value, hopefully great value. If they're not, they're in the wrong business. So when you approach someone and you understand that you're really there to do something positive for them, make money for them, enhance their lives, why is there a need to be subservient?
Yeah.
So the great ones meet these people from a point of equality. And that begets respect. And people aren't going to buy from you unless they respect you.
Yeah. So do you think to some degree then that somehow people have created this idea where, I mean, a lot of salespeople feel like, oh, I don't want to be too salesy. I don't want to come across as a salesperson. I become very, as you say, deferential. I'm kind of grateful for them even entertaining me, and I'm always on edge, that they're, that I'm going to be kicked out at any stage of the conversation. And in some ways, we've made this so lacking in confidence. We've taken the confidence away from salespeople to do exactly what you say, is to meet people in an equal setting.
Yeah, I met a man one time. I wrote a blog about this. I needed a piece of exercise equipment because as it turned out, I had a synovial cyst between L4 and L5, although I didn't know that at the time. Mm-hmm. So I called on this individual who was operating a exercise equipment store, high-end equipment. And it turned out that a $15 rope was all I really needed, that $2,000 machine, and he told me that.
Wow.
And when it was all over with, I complimented him on what a great salesperson he was. And the man was aghast. He did not want to be thought of as a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
He saw that that had negative connotations for him, which I tried to correct. I thought that, and that there's a lot of that, and it's pitiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I completely agree with you. I think it's pitiful, and I also think it's kind of insulting in many ways, because when people say, "Oh, I don't want to come across as a salesperson," or whatever. I mean, I understand that if you're pitching like some crazy circus barker, right? But when you're selling to somebody, they know you're a salesperson. The person at the other end knows you're a salesperson. So if you're apologizing or trying to hide that fact, I mean, it's kind of insulting. It's kind of silly, really. I think to the point of what you were just saying, it's really about, okay, a salesperson can be a very valuable, helpful person, to the buyer, and if you approach it from that point of view, then you should be confident because you're bringing a value to the table, right?
Absolutely. Let me try to put it to you this way too, John. Many a time I met an individual who was downright hostile. There are so many negatives that have, I mean, there are people out there that are not professional, and right. they bring the whole profession down, and so you have customers who are leery. And whenever I ran into someone who was showing that they were leery or even hostile, I would immediately have a confrontation with them. I'd call time out, and I'd say, kind of smile and say, about 1 out of every 10, 12 times I meet someone or present this, I run into someone who is really leery, and I can feel how leery you are. And I want to tell you that I did not come here to throw a lot of garbage at you. I take a lot of pride in what I do. But I didn't come here to push you or sell you something that you don't want or need. I came here to bring value to you. And when I would confront them that way, they would get in touch with their own feelings, and most often they were embarrassed.
Mm.
And from that point on, I had much more control over that situation because they felt bad about how they had behaved.
Yeah, well, that really reinforces what the title of your book, Selling Fearlessly, because that sounds to me like you have to have the confidence to be able to address or take control of the situation. So why is it that you think a lot of salespeople, and maybe the people who manage them, have problems with having the confidence to take control of a situation?
Yeah. Well, in too many cases, they don't believe in what they're doing. They don't believe that their value is worthy. And somebody who's in that situation is dead before they start. I think in other cases, there is just this instinctive inclination to take a subservient position.
Mm-hmm. So how would you? What are some ways that you would suggest that salespeople could overcome that natural inclination and reorient the way they approach a sales interaction?
Well, you have to be your own psychologist before you ever go out in the field. You have to take on the personality of that type of an individual. years ago, I think this is relative to your question. Years ago, when I was a young man, although I didn't let it stop me, a certain type of woman would intimidate me. I didn't let her know that, but I could feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I just decided I was going to put a stop to this. So I decided, you know, I had to send my subconscious messages that I was this cool, calm, funny, together man that women really wanted to be with. And you know, I half felt it, but as I said, there was a certain type of woman that could intimidate me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just decided I was going to take on the personality of Cary Grant. And I did. And from that point on, there wasn't a woman who intimidated me.
Yeah.
On the contrary, I was able to just... It worked. I'll just say that it worked.
Well, there you go. You see, with sales chats, you don't just get sales advice, you also get life, and now you get dating advice too.
Well, let me say this. These things are interconnected.
I completely
If you
agree.
think you can... if you think you can turn it on in one part of your life, you know, I shouldn't say that. There are people who can do that. They'll have it in one part of their life and not in another. But in most cases, you know, if it'll work here, it's going to work here.
Yeah. But I think a lot of what you're saying, it comes down to awareness. What you said is actually taking a step back for a moment. So for salespeople, maybe taking a step back and saying, you know, maybe why am I not being successful, and taking a hard look at that, and sort of, and maybe recognizing what you said, that I'm not.
Well, let me take it one step further.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. I think that I know when I was in the field, I really believed in what I had to offer. And so I felt it was my responsibility to bring this value to people. And if I wasn't going to do that, they were going to miss out and not benefit. And that was the attitude I carried with me. Supreme confidence in the value I had. Not just in me as an individual. I mean, it's true that I knew my business backwards, forwards, and sideways. There wasn't anything I was going to hear that I hadn't heard before. There was nothing I wasn't able to respond to. You do have to know your material, and you have to work hard, but I believed in the value so much that it was my responsibility to bring that value to people.
Right, and I think that's a critical point, because I think what you're talking about here is maybe there's a lot of salespeople who don't believe that they bring that value, or don't have that confidence, or don't have that enthusiasm even for what they're selling, and that comes across in their interactions. So I think from what you're saying is you really do need to believe, you need obviously to know your product, but you need to believe in the value it can bring, or the service, and the value you can bring personally to the equation.
Yeah,
otherwise you're in a deferential position.
Yeah, not only do you have to believe in it, but you have to be so excited about it that you're just about jumping out of your clothes. You can't wait to get to that individual and talk to them about it, to show them what it can do for them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, if people, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're selling me something and I don't feel like you love this thing and really believe in it, then how am I supposed to be confident in it?
Right, right, yeah.
So why is that a struggle for some people?
a lack of esteem.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like themselves enough. They don't. It's a lack of esteem. It's a negative personality.
Right.
Those two things alone will just cripple you.
So how much would you look at, okay, the responsibility of sales managers to make sure that they send the right people out into the field, or they recruit the right people, they train them the right way?
Yeah, well, that's another problem, that we have so many companies nowadays who don't manage their people at all, let alone poorly. I mean, they don't even train them in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
And that is catastrophic. And then you have sales managers that are so loaded down with other tasks that they can't go out in the field and show people how to do it. I used to take people in the field and I showed them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like writing a great novel or even a good sales book. When I sat down to write Selling Fearlessly, I didn't want to write in the abstract style of telling people. I wanted to tell stories that actually showed them through their own five senses,
right,
how to do it. And nowadays you have managers who are so inundated with other tasks that they don't bother to be managers of their salespeople, and that's ridiculous. And if companies are in that situation, they should bring outside people in. I mean, and in too many cases they're penny wise and pound foolish about that.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Having come from that background myself, I understand how people. I always say that if you took 100 CEOs and said how important is training, they'd all, do you think training is important? 100 would put their hands up, and then if you said, okay, how many of you are going to spend money on it this year, you'd be lucky if 2 put their hands up.
Yeah, I'll give you a concrete example of this, and it wasn't even in person.
Mm-hmm.
There was a team of people who had read my book. And I told the manager that I'd be glad to have a call-in session with the entire team. And I spent about an hour and a half on the phone with these people, answering questions, giving advice, and giving concrete examples of what to do, actually what to say to people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, I'm not going to throw names out, but one of them turned his entire career around after that session.
Wow.
He was just lights out after that day. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm. And
it was just an hour and a half on the phone. Can you imagine if I could have taken that young man into the field?
Wow.
Or even just met with them personally?
So on that subject, what are 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you'd offer a salesperson that could really make a change to how they sell?
Well, I think we've already talked about the main one,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of equality. There's no getting around that. In my book, I wrote about the selling triangle.
Yeah.
And one side is mental attitude, one side is work habits, and one side is knowledge, salesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
So we begin with mental attitude. You have to have a mental attitude made out of titanium. Nothing can touch you.
Mm-hmm.
I would run in periodically to a real jerk who not only wanted to rip me down, but he wanted to rip my service down. And I wouldn't allow that. I just wouldn't allow it. Secondly, work habits. Nobody can molest mother law of averages. You have to do the work.
Right.
I get young people who call me from all over the world, and I usually have to drag this out of them, John, but I'll ask them, how many meetings are you having a week? And sometimes it's 4, 3, 2, maybe 6, and I tell them, I used to, now at the end of my career, I flew out on Sunday, I made my calls and set up my appointments on Monday. I had 4 presentations on Tuesday, 4 on Wednesday. In earlier years, I had 12, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I took off on Friday. But those 12 presentations, they happened. There was nothing that was going to stop me. I wasn't going to settle for less. So do the work. People used to ask me, what's the secret of your success? And I would very simply say, I do the work.
Yeah. And I think that's an incredibly important point to get across here, because I've written a little bit about this myself, I think we live in a shortcut culture today, where people think that there are shortcuts or there are silver bullets, and we've moved away a little bit from what you're just talking about, where it's about hard work. Hard work pays off. And in sales, it pays off double.
Yeah, and the third side is you have to know your business like you do yourself, your wife. You have to know every aspect about it. You can't be lazy that way. You have to understand selling and meeting people and getting in front of people. I would pick up the telephone and somebody, first thing they wanted to do was get rid of me. And I would say something like, I know you get about 20 calls a day, and you probably want to get rid of about 19 and a half out of 20, but let me ask you this. If there's something that would really make a huge difference for your business, mean tens of thousands of dollars, is it worth 10 minutes of your time? And let me say this, if after those 10 minutes, if I don't make sense to you, I'll shut up and shake your hand. Is that fair enough? Well, okay. And I had my appointment. You don't just, when someone says no, collapse. You take that no and you astound them.
So do you think too many people give up too easily?
Sure. Of course. Of course.
And it gets back to what you said at the beginning about confidence.
And that comes from that same subservient attitude. Oh my, I don't want to push you.
Yeah,
but your job isn't to push. Your job is to intrigue.
Yeah, to intrigue, to educate, I couldn't agree more. So what are some of the other ways, do you think, that maybe sales managers could, as you were saying, get out in the field? You went out in the field and helped people, but how do you think sales managers could better train or prepare their people?
There is no better way than role-playing and taking them out in the field. There is no substitute for that.
And then really coaching them?
Yeah, taking them out, training them with hands-on role-playing. And you hear weakness, so hey, you trying to put me to sleep here or sell me something? And taking them out in the field and observing them in action. There's no substitute for that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny because I'm a big believer in role plays as well as a great training and prep tool. But it's funny that a lot of people don't do it, because if you think about it, what do you do? I mean, football teams, whatever, they practice drills, they have practice games. And everybody role plays really, and yet in sales, where it's critical, almost performance art, you don't.
Well, the aphorism is practice is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to practice.
So we got a few minutes left here. So you've had a long career in sales, and you've seen it go through a few evolutions or changes. What do you think about today? Do you think sales is changing in any significant ways?
Yeah, sure. Especially if it's B2B. Now, remember, I was in a B2C world. Even though I was contacting business people, it was more of a B2C type of sale. But I have many colleagues in my sales mastermind group who are B2B, and sure, nowadays you have the internet, people are doing research beforehand, they know a great deal, but that's still no substitute for a salesperson. They still need the salesperson. But there's more information that the buyer brings to the meeting now. So that's different, yes. But here's a phrase that I'd like to leave you with. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And I will tell you, I read some of these other blogs, and people make it very complicated. It's not complicated. Have a rock-solid mental attitude, know your business, and do the work. And I have seen people who were, I'm thinking of one man particularly in my mind. He was a poor dresser. He invariably went to meetings with mustard on his tie. He was not well spoken. He butchered the English language. He just outworked everybody. And all the people who said this guy couldn't make it under any circumstances were proved wrong. Because he outworked them to death.
So there's no, as you say, there's no substitute for hard work. Okay, for the last minute, what I'd like to ask you is, throughout your career, what were the couple of things you did every morning to prepare yourself?
I'm sorry?
I said, what were some of the things that you did every morning to prepare yourself to have the best sales day possible?
You know, I don't know that I did that. Every morning I would get up, I would shave and shower, and get dressed, and have breakfast. And I knew on Monday at 9 o'clock I was going to start making my calls, and I wasn't going to finish until I had all my appointment slot made. And on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, I just went to these appointments. And every single time I opened my briefcase, it was my job to be on, to give a magnificent performance, that no one was to be cheated, that I had to give my very best every time out, every time. There was no being bored with it, there was no getting tired of it. It was, can't wait to get to the next one. On to the next.
On to the next. I love that. That's a great way to end. Is always be on to the next. Be confident. Know your product or service inside out. Know how to bring value and have confidence in what you do.
Yeah. Anything less than that, and you'll never be a champion.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, the 30 minutes have flown. Look, we're at the half-hour mark already. This has been fascinating, Robert. I love the insights. I think people would have found this very, very valuable. So I'd like to thank you for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks.
Oh, John.